Tell you though, a lot of people would want to sweep the whole thing under the rug and they think it's over. But crime doesn't really work like that. And criminals don't work like that. As the good chairman said when he kicked this off, if you forgive crime, if you pardon it, if you let it go, you're going to see more of it. Well, let me tell you a little story about that. Discharge of a firearm, manslaughter, drunk driving, grand theft, aggravated kidnapping, reckless driving, reckless homicide, invasion of privacy, conspiracy to commit murder as a hate crime, possession of child pornography, violation of protective orders, assault, violation of anti-stalking order, DUI, battery, felony, malicious bodily injury, rape, forgery, sexual assault, illegal gun possession, drug possession, conspiracy to murder. Who's responsible for all that? These people were pardoned by Donald Trump. Sentences commuted. Out on the streets now, these people doing all of that. Let me tell you about one of them.
What is happening in Congress right now is exactly why Americans are losing trust in Washington. One side says it's about law and order. The other says it's about accountability. But what unfolded in this hearing quickly turned into something much bigger than a routine political debate. Before we get into it, if you enjoy in-depth political coverage that breaks down the biggest moments from Capitol Hill, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to Blue Flash, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest videos. We cover the moments everyone is talking about and explain why they matter. Now let's get into it.
Civil servants, expert criminal prosecutors fired because they had prosecuted people for violently attacking police officers, storming the Capitol, saying they were going to hang Mike Pence in order to overthrow a presidential election, and they got fired because of it. A massive violation of civil service, constitutional rights, and the principles of public safety. Thank you very much. I wanted to just begin by underscoring three things that you said that I hope people will keep in mind as you hear my remarks. One is that when you reward criminal behavior, you get a lot more of it. Two, you said it's not funny when it happens to you. And alas, I have a personal story to tell. And three, you said letting criminals off the hook is not compassion and it's not justice. So I want to agree very strongly with those 3 points that you just made, Chairman Van Drew. And I want to thank the witnesses for being with us today. Just before the shutdown, the subcommittee convened a field hearing in Charlotte to advance the tired, I would say utterly exhausted Republican claim that Democrats are somehow soft on crime. This is an odd proposition to me, given that Democratic-led cities today are now driving an historic nationwide decrease in crime, especially homicide and violent crime, following a dramatic spike in those categories under the first Trump administration. One North Carolina local news outlet, the News and Observer, captured the very paradoxical nature of that hearing in an article titled, "Republicans are in charge in North Carolina, but somehow Democrats are to blame for violent crime." Well, the News and Observer is correct. Republicans from the White House to Congress to the state houses are systematically undermining public safety in communities across America with what I would call gangster state policies, while claiming that Democrats are to blame. Well, what's really going on? Let's start with the administration's first day in office. How about that? On the first day, Donald Trump pardoned nearly 1,600 January 6th insurrectionists, people who either pled guilty or were convicted beyond a reasonable doubt by a jury of their peers for hundreds and hundreds of crimes, including hundreds who violently attacked Capitol Police officers, Metropolitan Police Department officers, Montgomery County, Maryland police officers from Virginia, and so on, with baseball bats, steel pipes, Trump flags, Confederate battle flags, broken furniture, and bear mace into people's eyes. The months since Raskin, the Department of Justice proceeded to fire dozens of FBI agents and federal prosecutors, the most experienced federal prosecutors we had, career civil servants appointed under Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, simply because they had worked in the January 6th investigation. Nothing like that had ever happened before in the history of the Department of Justice, and I hope nothing like that will ever happen again. These were career civil servants, expert criminal prosecutors fired because they had prosecuted people for violently attacking police officers, storming the Capitol, saying they were going to hang Mike Pence in order to overthrow a presidential election, and they got fired because of it. A massive violation of civil service, constitutional rights, and the principles of public safety. 140 of our officers were injured, wounded, disfigured, disabled, hospitalized on that day. 140 of them. I wish I could take 140 minutes and tell you about each one, but I'll tell you about one of them. I'll tell you about Sergeant Gonell. Now, Sergeant Gonell's written a book about his experience, which I recommend highly to all of you. His family were immigrants to America. He became a citizen as a kid, and he fell in love with police work. And his family took a trip to Washington, and they visited the Capitol, and he met police officers here. And he had a dream that he would become a Capitol police officer one day. And what do you know? He became a Capitol police officer after he served in the Army. And he went to Iraq, and he went to Afghanistan. And then he was here on January 6th. And he said he faced violence, which he described as medieval in nature, that was far worse than anything he had seen in combat in Iraq or in Afghanistan. And he fought for hours and hours. And he was so wounded, they destroyed a rotator cuff. His left foot was smashed and destroyed. He couldn't lift his shoulder. He was beaten in the face and the head. He did everything he could to try to get back to work, and the force told him he was just no longer physically fit to do it. Forced to retire by the insurrection Donald Trump incited, according to a bipartisan vote of the House of Representatives, which 57 of 100 senators voted to convict him on, the most widespread bipartisan vote in the history of presidential impeachments. And he was that wounded, that disfigured, that incapacitated. He could no longer serve. He had to leave his dream job and is now living on a fraction of what his income was before because of that violence that took place. That's just one story. I wish you could know all of the stories. Maybe you know the story of Michael Fanone. He was a D.C. cop. He wasn't even on duty here. He heard about it, that the Capitol was under attack on the radio. He immediately drove to the Capitol, got off several blocks away, ran to the scene to join the police officers. And he got pulled into the crowd after fighting for hours, and he had a heart attack. And he was afraid that he was going to die. And he begged them. He said, "I have 4 daughters. Spare my life." And his life was just barely spared. There's supposed to be a plaque up in the House of Representatives to the officers because of their indomitable valor and courage that day, but the Speaker won't put that up. And they won't give $1 to the families of any of these police officers whose lives have been so fundamentally altered. But they did sneak a little provision in to give $1 million to each Republican senator who were inconvenienced because they were treated like other American citizens, and their phone records were subpoenaed because they were involved in the conspirators of that attack. That's where the sympathies run. Each of those guys was going to get $1 million payout. At least, I think I heard Lindsey Graham today say he wanted tens of millions for what happened to him. What happened to him? Did he get sprayed in the face with bear mace? Did he have to fight for hours to protect American democracy? No, his phone records were subpoenaed the same way any American's phone records can be subpoenaed if they're involved in a criminal conspiracy or if their name comes up in a criminal investigation. And if you don't like that, you should support the bill that Chairman Jordan brought before us in markup yesterday, which we passed unanimously numerous times. That would save all Americans from abuse of that process. We've been trying to do that for nearly a decade, I believe, from this committee, and the Senate has consistently rejected it. They're not interested in protecting anybody else's civil liberties. They just want their $1 million jackpot payout. Well, in any event, so that was the story on January 6th, and this administration's done everything in its power now to reward the people who participated in it. Meantime, they're firing the officers, the FBI agents, the prosecutors who tried to prosecute. I want to tell you, though, a lot of people would want to sweep the whole thing under the rug, and they think it's over. But crime doesn't really work like that. And criminals don't work like that. As the good chairman said when he kicked this off, if you forgive crime, if you pardon it, if you let it go, you're going to see more of it. Well, let me tell you a little story about that. Because we've got lots of cases of these pardoned criminals going out and committing other crimes. Let me tell you the ones that we found that have been committed by people that Donald Trump pardoned on his first day in office. They've gone on to do terroristic threats, home invasion, burglary, vandalism, theft, felony assault with a deadly weapon, discharge of a firearm, manslaughter, drunk driving, grand theft, aggravated kidnapping, reckless driving, reckless homicide, invasion of privacy, conspiracy to commit murder as a hate crime, possession of child pornography, violation of protective orders, assault, violation of anti-stalking order, DUI, battery, felony, malicious bodily injury, rape, forgery, sexual assault, illegal gun possession, drug possession, conspiracy to murder. Who's responsible for all that? These people were pardoned by Donald Trump. Sentences commuted. Out on the streets. Now, these people doing all of that. Let me tell you about one of them. I told you I was going to get a little bit personal here. I take the subject raised today personally. This guy's name is Taylor Taranto. He was pardoned.
Representative Jamie Raskin walked into this hearing facing a Republican argument that Democrats have been weak on crime. Instead of accepting that premise, he challenged it head on. The central point of his remarks was that public safety isn't just about tough rhetoric. He argued that leaders should be judged by the consequences of their decisions, not simply by campaign slogans or political branding. One of the biggest issues Raskin raised involved President Donald Trump's pardons for many people convicted in connection with the January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol. According to Raskin, these pardons sent the wrong message by reducing accountability for crimes connected to that day. He argued that when government rewards criminal conduct, it risks encouraging future lawbreaking. That's a serious claim, and it's one that has fueled political debate ever since those pardons were announced. Supporters of the pardons have argued they corrected what they viewed as unfair prosecutions or excessive sentences. Critics, including Raskin, argue the pardons undermined respect for the rule of law. That disagreement sits at the heart of this hearing. Raskin also shifted the conversation toward crime statistics. He argued that recent data show declines in violent crime and homicide in many Democratic-led cities, pushing back against the idea that Democratic leadership automatically leads to rising crime. Whether viewers agree with his interpretation or not, it was a strategic move. Instead of defending against Republican criticism, he challenged the foundation of that criticism and tried to reframe the entire discussion. Another major part of his remarks focused on the Justice Department. Raskin criticized the firing of prosecutors and FBI personnel who had worked on January 6 investigations. In his view, removing career officials because of the cases they handled risks creating the appearance that law enforcement decisions are driven by politics rather than by the facts of individual cases. He argued that institutions work best when prosecutors and investigators can perform their duties without fear of political retaliation. The hearing became even more emotional when Raskin spoke about the injuries suffered by police officers during the Capitol attack. He highlighted the experience of Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Gonell, who sustained severe injuries and was eventually forced to retire. He also discussed former D.C. Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Fanone, who responded during the attack and later described the violence he experienced. For Raskin, these officers represented people who answered the call to protect public institutions under extraordinarily dangerous circumstances. From his perspective, any conversation about January 6 has to include the sacrifices made by those officers. As the hearing continued, Raskin introduced an intensely personal story. He described the case of Taylor Taranto, a January 6 defendant later arrested on separate federal weapons charges after authorities alleged he possessed firearms and ammunition while making threatening statements near the homes of public officials. Raskin said Taranto also appeared near the elementary school attended by his children and described how unsettling that experience was for his family. Whether one agrees with Raskin's broader political conclusions or not, moments like this reminded everyone in the room that political conflicts can sometimes have deeply personal consequences for the people involved. From there, the discussion expanded beyond individual cases to a larger question that continues to divide Americans. How should a democracy balance mercy, accountability, executive power, and public safety. That's where this hearing became more than another partisan exchange. It became a debate over how justice should operate when politics and criminal law collide. As the hearing moved forward, Raskin widened his argument beyond January 6. He claimed that recent personnel decisions at the Department of Justice had weakened the agency by removing experienced prosecutors and creating uncertainty among career staff. In his view, when legal decisions appear to be influenced by politics, public confidence in the justice system suffers. Raskin also criticized other clemency decisions made by President Trump, arguing they reflected a broader pattern of using the pardon power in controversial ways. These claims are disputed by Trump and his supporters, who have defended the decisions as lawful exercises of presidential authority, and, in some cases, corrections of what they believe were politically motivated prosecutions. That contrast is worth paying attention to because it highlights the larger debate. The question isn't only about one pardon or one investigation. It's about how Americans think executive power should be used and where the limits of that power should be. One of the strongest moments in the hearing came when Raskin returned to a simple principle. He argued that if criminal conduct is rewarded instead of punished, it can encourage future lawbreaking. He tied that argument to his personal experience, describing how threatening it felt when someone later accused in a separate federal weapons case appeared near his neighborhood after having been connected to January 6. Whether you agree with his conclusions or not, that story changed the tone of the hearing. It shifted the conversation away from political slogans and toward the real-world impact that public officials and their families can experience when threats become personal. Here's my takeaway. Political leaders from every party should be held accountable for the consequences of their decisions. If a president exercises the pardon power, the public has every right to debate whether those pardons advance justice or undermine it. Likewise, allegations of political interference in law enforcement deserve careful scrutiny, but they should be evaluated based on evidence rather than assumption. At the same time, crime, public safety, and the integrity of the justice system are issues that affect everyone, regardless of political affiliation. Americans expect violent offenders to be prosecuted fairly, expect law enforcement officers who risk their lives to be respected, and expect prosecutors to do their jobs without political pressure. The hearing reflected how deeply divided the country remains over these questions. Supporters of President Trump see many of these actions through one lens, while critics see them through another. Those differences are likely to remain part of the national conversation for years to come. What stood out most wasn't simply the exchange between Republicans and Democrats. It was how quickly the discussion moved beyond campaign talking points into larger questions about accountability, presidential authority, and the public's trust in government institutions. Now it's your turn. Do you think the hearing raised legitimate concerns about accountability and the justice system, or do you think it was driven more by partisan politics? Share your thoughts in the comments below, but remember to keep the discussion respectful. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more in-depth coverage of the biggest moments from Congress and American politics, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to Blue Flash, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next analysis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.